and get this party started. So, for those who are just joining us, welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time, if you haven't done so already, please give us a like on Facebook and feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel too. We'd love to have you. We post all these videos on our YouTube channel for those to go back and watch. And if you're not familiar with the format, the way we always do it is we have a main topic with the person that we're interviewing to discuss. So we will start off kind of getting to know Melissa a little bit because I don't know Melissa, which I love having conversations with people I don't know because it flows so much better that way when I like organically want to ask you questions and have these kind of like thoughts. It's like, all right, I don't know this person, but I'm curious about X, Y, or Z about them. So we start off getting to know you, and then we get into our main topic of the night, which tonight is working on relationships within ourselves. And we're going to discuss that with you. You are a certified life coach, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. So we have some real experience here that, will be able to lead us down the right road, which will be fantastic. So, all right. Well, having said that, welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, it's
Melissa,
great to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, we're happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about you. Where do you live? What do you do? Single, obviously, but how long and all that kind of good stuff.
All of that. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. I grew up here. I used to tell everybody I was a 5th generation Nevadan. Turns out I'm a 6th generation Nevadan. My family history goes back a long way. 4th generation or 5th generation Las Vegan. I love Vegas. I think this city really has a lot to offer, and I keep leaving and thinking that my life will take me other places and then end up coming back. So my most recent journey, I lived in China for 2 years. I taught art and music at an international school there. Wow. It was really cool. I did a ton of traveling, lots of, self-awareness happening. Obviously, living abroad, you are faced with a lot of different challenges. I have my master's degree in school counseling from the University of Utah. So go Utes.
Very
cool. Wait, sorry, from UNLV. And then I have my bachelor's degree in music education from the University of Utah. So
I always forget where I went to school too.
I know, okay. Right? Yeah. So I bleed red from both schools. And I really loved my time up in Utah, but I realized that it's a different animal up there, and I came home. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm single. I've never been married.
Okay.
Let's see what else. I don't know what else to say on that front, but I do think that it has lent itself to the life that I have now. I've always been pretty self-aware and pretty introspective, even from when I was a little kid, and noticing my feelings and how I reacted to things and just kind of how I fit into the world. And so it just was something that I felt like I had some things that I needed to work on within myself. And one of those was learning to love the life that I had. I was 30 and I wasn't married, and everybody around me seemed to either be getting married or doing something important with their lives. And I was just barely graduating college. So I felt like I was kind of behind a little bit. And I really had to come to terms with that in a lot of different ways. And so I saw several therapists and decided to do a master's degree and all of these different things that kind of led me to where I am now, which is a life that I really do love. And a lot of single people, I think there's this challenge because we don't want to give up hope of finding someone. But at the same time, we don't want to, wallow away either in misery. We want to try and have the best of both worlds. And I really do believe that that's possible. So that's why when I decided to become a life coach, I actually signed up for the life coach school. They have something called self-coaching scholars. And I was like going to prove all of it wrong because I went into life coaching thinking this is a racket, they just want to take your money, like all of these different things. And then I realized when I got into the program that it really mirrored a lot of the things that I'd been learning through my own self-education, through different therapists that I'd worked with, kind of through my counseling program, like all of the things just really fit. And I felt like it had something that I could give, not only to enrich my own life, but the lives of everyone around me. And so it's just been a really cool journey, and being able to become more self-aware and being able to help other people in that process has been super cool.
So now, was this like a certification you got on top of your master's program, or was this kind of like the specialty in your master's program?
Yeah, so I have my master's in school counseling. So there's a lot. The professional, it's the licensed professional counselor track. And then my program was with that. So if I would have gone to school for another couple semesters, I would have been able to become a licensed professional counselor. And I decided to do school counseling instead because I have some, traumatic things that happened to me when I was younger. And I found that when I lived in that space all the time, it was really depressing, because I was kind of, absorbing some of the things that were happening to other people. And so school counseling was awesome because I could give kids tools and we could work on all these different strategies. And then they were able to, I don't want to say get better, but that their lives were different. And so I got to deal, and when the traumatic things did come, I was able to field it out to somebody who could handle that level of, trauma or grief or whatever it was. And then I could focus on really, skill building and resilience building. So the certification was different. It wasn't part of my master's program at all. This was just something that I did for myself, just to, enrich my own learning, and also to be able to share it in a way that I felt others could relate to.
Great. So now you said you kind of were at 30, just finishing up college. So was there kind of a break where you went traveling for a while, or like what, right after high school? It sounds like there's a gap. Fill in the gaps for me there.
So I went to a performing arts school when I was in high school, and I was a voice major. And I ended up getting a full ride to UNLV for college. And I was in the music program, and I was so burnt out. I'd really pushed myself really hard in my high school. And by the time I got to college, I realized that I wasn't going to be the opera diva that my teachers thought that I would be. And I took a break. And what ended up happening is I flunked out of my freshman year of college. And so obviously, if you don't pass, your professors don't want you to come back. So I lost my scholarship and I had to go to community college. And I was a little bit lost for a while. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I didn't have that source of income in terms of like someone paying for my school. So I had to do that on my own. And I switched my major to elementary education. But in the meantime, there were a lot of other classes that I was taking. Anyway, by the time I did end up graduating, I had enough credits for 2 bachelor's degrees. But then I graduated. I ended up coming back to music, which I moved up to Utah to go to Westminster College after my mission. I served a mission in Boston, Spanish speaking. And I ended up back in Utah, and I was going to go to Westminster College because they had a really great teacher education program. And then I ended up missing music. And before, I was a vocal major, and it's pretty intense. Music education is also pretty intense, but it didn't have the same bite or cattiness, or like the competitiveness that I had when I was a voice major. And so I came back and graduated in music education. And yeah, it took a long time because I was trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. And even though I just went from music to education to music, there was a lot of courses in between where I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was taking all these general classes, and yeah.
I know that path well, yes. So interestingly enough, my ex wanted to go into the music program as well. She had a great voice. I am the type of guy, they will literally probably take my temple recommend away if I show up for choir. They're like, dude, you are so bad. We don't want anything to do with you. So what were you planning on doing with that? I mean, did you have like dreams of like, being a singer or something like that? Or, I mean, for her, the music degree, she wanted to be a music teacher.
Yes.
Is that kind of where you were going with it?
Originally I wanted to, well, I didn't really know, like I knew I wanted to try because my voice teacher and my choir teacher were really, positive in leading me to want to explore doing classical music. But I realized that I didn't love it the same way. I didn't love it enough for people to want to practice hours on end. It just wasn't for me. And so when I came back, I did decide to do music education because I loved elementary music and I thought that would be a really good fit for me. And so when I came back the second time, that's what I ended up studying was elementary music, which is kind of interesting because they didn't have an elementary music program. There's not a lot of school districts in Utah that have elementary standard. And so we had to create, when I did my student teaching, we had to create an opportunity or a position for me to find someone who could teach me who would let me be supervised for elementary music. So I've always been kind of the person that if I want something, I go after what I want, even if it seems kind of like, oh, this wasn't an option, and I make it I make it an option. And I had a really great experience. I had a great, teacher, and I don't know, so when I was in third grade, my dream was to be the fourth member of Wilson Phillips. So I did have dreams of stardom, but by the time I got to college, I just wanted to teach and sing and have fun.
Was there like a missing piece of Wilson Phillips or something? Like they were looking for this elusive fourth member and just couldn't find it? I mean,
I hoped that they would hear me singing on my jungle gym because my house faced a freeway, and they would pull over and stop and invite me in. That was the goal. I thought if I sang loud enough, they would find me.
Well, that's a good group to want to join. They were awesome. So,
have you ever seen that guy on Facebook? His name is JJ Icefish.
No.
It's kind of one of those viral videos because he wants to be a rapper, but it is so bad, so horrific, that it's got like tens of millions of views. Just like, wow, this is so epically bad. That's probably how I would be if I were a singer. I'm probably on those levels. So if you ever get a chance after the show, JJ Icefish, it's terrible.
JJ.
Check it out. It's really bad. So anyways, I digress. So during all this time, I'm sure you're probably in the singles ward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you hit that elusive, like kind of the 30-year-old, like graduation day for like either like put up or shut up or get out sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that? I mean, tell me a little bit about that process.
It was kind of interesting for me. I was in the singles ward, and other than my mission, I had been in the singles ward. So from the time I was 18 until I was 30, I'd been in the singles ward except for, 18 months. And it was really interesting. I remember sitting in Relief Society and in Sunday school, and people would talk about like this spiritual experience that they had where they learned like this huge lesson. And it was lessons that I thought were so, valuable and meaningful when I was, 21, 22. And I realized that I was past that. Like it just gotten to the point where I didn't feel like I had anything that I was contributing to the ward. And I didn't feel like I was getting the spiritual, reserve that I needed, to stay. And so I actually left when I was 29, like 29 and a half. And it was nice because I had a roommate at the time, and then I had another friend from the singles ward who wanted to leave too. And so we ended up going to a family ward together. And that was nice because I wasn't alone. My roommate was there. She'd left the singles ward a long time ago. So the transition, and then I was really, really involved in like the creation of the mid-singles program in Las Vegas. We didn't really have anything at the time. So I was doing that and kind of working towards that. And it didn't really, I was still going to like family home evenings with friends until I was about 32. So it felt like a pretty natural transition in terms of just like activity. And I had plenty of friends and things like that. But it was just like this internal, like the internal mess in turning 30
Sure.
and facing your, you're like looking out at the rest of your life and wondering, okay, what's next?
Yeah, what's coming next?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you didn't have that elusive talk with the bishop where he's like, so we need to talk about turning 30 and moving on to the next phase of life.
Well, I didn't. I really left on my own terms, and I feel like that was the perfect scenario for me. I do say that with the caveat that I do think it's a lot easier for women in the church to transition over than it is for my guy friends. I mean, I can't speak for other men, but I do know that I do have several guy friends who really felt pushed out, and I totally understand that. I think there is a little bit when I hear, some of my other friends talk about that transition for them, that it's not easy. And I mean, I had my own stuff, but I think everybody has different aspects about that shift that are challenging. But I definitely culturally, I know how hard it can be, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that was tough on me. Like I got married at 22, so I never had the whole like getting pushed out of the single award or the young adult award, and then I got divorced in my 40s, and then I was like, well, I'm too old now for the single adult award. So I was like I just never got a chance to experience that whole like being in a ward with single people. So it's kind of weird. So how's my mic doing now?
Much better.
There's this weird button in like Zoom now that comes on and says turn on original sound or turn off original sound. It's like really weird now. Never seen that button before.
Yeah.
So
Now
Melissa,
you
oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. So you mentioned that you went on a mission. So why don't you tell us about that?
I originally didn't want to go on a mission. I actually wanted to go through the temple. So I was 19 and I went through 2 separate temple prep classes, and I talked to my bishop. And he said, no, I'm not going to let you go. You're not going on a mission. You're not getting married. So no. And I ended up switching wards when I was 19, and I hadn't been there very long, but the bishop stood up and he said, if you feel like you need to go to the temple, come talk to me. And I did. And I left with the first half of my recommend. But it was interesting because during that process, I kept getting like little nudges about a mission. And I was the person that did not want to go on a mission. I'm pretty extroverted. I didn't feel like I, needed to go. But every once in a while I'd get these little nudges. And so it took about 6 months, and around the time of my birthday, when I did turn 21, that I decided that I would go. I prayed about it, and I felt that I should go. And I really wanted to go out of the country. I love other cultures and other places, and I wanted to be able to experience that and learn a new language. And so I got my mission call, and they'd asked me in my questions, if I'd ever had any injuries or anything like that. And I'd been in several car accidents up to that point, and I kind of had a feeling I'd be staying stateside. And when I opened my mission call, it was to Boston, but it was Spanish speaking. And so that's how I knew that God was looking out for me, that I did get a little bit of that international experience. And it was amazing. I met people from all over the world. And so it really was, and it taught me a lot. It really was the perfect mission for me. It was really hard, but it taught me a lot of things that I needed to learn about myself and things that I needed to be aware of in myself. I realized that I had anxiety while I was on my mission. And so that's been something that I've been working on since then. And I really do think missions are just hard for everybody in different ways. And my way just happened to be like internally. And so it really gave me, I met so many amazing people, and I had so many amazing experiences, but it also taught me a lot about like myself and what I needed to work on within myself too. So it was really good experience.
Did you think you were more of an extrovert or an introvert?
So here's a funny story. My trainer was an introvert. She was from Argentina, bless her heart. She had me as her trainee. And the first 6 weeks, we didn't talk to anyone. Like, we didn't make any street contacts. We didn't wave to anybody. Like, she didn't talk to anybody. And I was miserable because I was like, aren't we supposed to be talking to people? Like, we go straight to an investigator's house, have the lesson, and then leave. And she had these investigators that she'd been working with for months, and they weren't going anywhere. And so finally one day I just asked her, I was like, can we talk to people? Is that something that we can do? And so I did. I just started talking to everybody. And it was really fascinating because the mission president would give me all of the new sisters in the mission. I was the second companion. So their trainer taught them the rules and, what to do and kind of how to be a missionary. And then they'd come to me and we'd learn street contacting and kind of like that more human relationship element of it. And my mission president had some really nice compliments to me about that. And I still to this day can remember some of the people that I contacted because our experiences were so powerful. And so I really realized that was something that I was gifted at, is connecting with people and sharing things that were important to me.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people struggle on missions. Like, I think the personalities, it's like the mission is all about getting out there and talking to people. And I think there's a lot of introverts that go on missions and they come home going, that was a difficult mission and it was so hard. And then others like I'm the same as you. I was out there I was on the buses talking on people. I went Spanish speaking Houston. So I was out talking to people. I was in stores. I'm like, hey, have you ever seen guys with name tags like this? And like, I had a companion that was the same way. He's like, dude, man, you talk to everybody. It's just like uncomfortable. But I thought the mission was like one of the best experiences of my life. Like, I'd go back again, like tomorrow, if they called and said, can you go on a mission? I'd be like, yeah. But I mean, I'm more of an extrovert too. So.
Yeah. Well,
and in Texas, so there's that. I said he was in Texas, so there's that.
God's country.
That's right.
He was down there with all the tarantulas.
Yeah, no,
Texas.
So I did not serve a mission, but my daughter did for a short time before COVID took her out, and not like she had to come home because of that kind of.
She's still alive. Okay.
She just had to come home because of COVID. But you know what? I hear that a lot. I hear that the mission is like so difficult, but that you learn so much, and that it is a blessing looking back upon it, even if right in the middle of it, it's just like the biggest challenge of your life. And so that seems to be the common theme, even if you're an introvert or an extrovert, depending on where you struggled, right? So I've never had that experience, but I hear that a lot. So.
Well, it's a little bit of a crucible. Like, you really do. I mean, I don't want to say you get squashed, but you kind of do. Like, you have a limited amount of time. You have to, absorb all of this new information. You have to be, I don't want to say a completely different person, but your lifestyle certainly changes. And there's like all of this, at least for me, there was a lot of internal pressure that I had placed on myself in being a good missionary. And so I think it just kind of, it's a lot all at once. And so being able to manage that is really a great life skill to have, because when you're in certain situations later, it definitely comes in handy for sure. But the one thing that I do want to stress though, is that I have so many friends who didn't need to serve a mission. Like, they may not have served a mission, men and women, and they're amazing members of the church. They're amazing missionaries. I don't think that I'm any better of a scriptorian because I went on a mission. But I am grateful for that opportunity. So I think it, when I have a lot of friends, I have a couple guy friends, especially, who didn't serve, and that's a real kind of thorn in their side. And I just look at them and I think, you're amazing. Yeah. But again, we all have those inner struggles where we, have these perceptions of ourselves, and we all got to work on it. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So you're going through and you're in kind of like the singles program, the young single adult, and you said that you transitioned from that and you were instrumental in starting the mid singles program. And I'm in Portland, so I kind of know how this goes. At one point, I kind of helped put together the mid singles program because after 30, it's sort of like you've got 18 to 30 and then like 31 till death, right? It's like, okay, you got these like 70-year-old guys at a dance with like 32-year-old girls and they're like hitting on them. I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe they're just like, well, I got a great pension, so maybe they're all, about that. But so tell me a little bit about like what kind of things did you guys do? Do you guys have a mid singles ward there? What do you have going on in Vegas?
So we do have a mid singles ward now. When we started with mid singles activities, it didn't really have like a name. It was just starting, like Huntington Beach was kind of starting some stuff. And, I mean, this was like 2008 or 9. And so we kind of wanted to get in on the action, but church leaders were very hesitant. And so we had to find a ward that would sponsor it so it could be a church activity. And so one of the singles ward, the YSA wards in Henderson, their bishop was very open to be willing to host, an activity or something that people could come to. So it was really interesting because we had no problem like planning the activity, but getting the word out because it wasn't a church sanctioned program was really, really challenging. And so because it wasn't, Facebook wasn't what it is today. I mean, social media was just kind of starting. Not a lot of people had it. So getting the word out was a little bit more challenging. And so we spent hours trying to track down like stake and ward bulletin people so we could get them information. And I remember at one point I was trying to get an activity in my home stakes bulletin, and he was in the stake presidency at the time, but he was one of my former YSA bishops. And he called me and he basically told me to cease and desist. Like, you can't advertise this activity. It's not church sanctioned. The general authorities haven't, approved this. I mean, there was a
This
lot.
was a stake president or a stake presidency member?
It was stake presidency member, but I mean, they were really, and I wasn't the only person that they talked to about that. Like, they were very anti-change. And so we worked really, really hard to try and get, these activities so that people who were our age could feel like they belonged. And so we did that for several years. And then we started doing parties outside of, that were just church standards, so we could kind of get around that a little bit. We still kept talking to stake presidents and bishops and just anybody who would listen to us. And it was so interesting because there was so much resistance. And I feel like in Vegas, we aren't so, I don't know. I was hoping that they would be a little bit more flexible and be willing to see, from our side. But it took several years before they would even entertain the idea of a magnet ward, which is where you have like MSA Sunday school and
Is that what you guys have now, is a magnet ward, or do you have it?
No. So it was really cool. We did have a magnet ward for a little while. It was kind of limping along, but then a stake president in the Spring Mountain Stake was really on board with our idea, and he really wanted it to be a full-fledged ward. And so he really pushed for it, and he got several stake leaders from surrounding areas to join together so that they would support a ward. And so I think it's been going like 5 or 6 years now.
Oh, wow. Cool.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so
how many people
it's
do you
really
have
cool.
that show up there?
I actually go to a home ward, but
so you get this ward built and you're like, all right, deuces, guys.
Going to the
I'm out.
go to the ward.
well, that's another story too. I didn't feel like that's where I needed to be. And so so it's over 100, I would say, every week, probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's a good chunk of people that go. And what's so awesome, since I've lived in Vegas for so long over my various journeys, I had never been married. I'd been in the singles program at this point, it's like 20 years. So I knew everybody. And then I knew them again when they got married and came back because they got divorced. And it's so nice.
You're like, ha ha.
Welcome back.
No, but I was just like, oh, I think I know you. Like
Oh,
we've met before. But it was just so interesting because I went recently, probably a couple months ago, and there were very few people that I knew. So to me, that's a sign that new people are coming, new people are experiencing it. And I know one of the main issues with that, there was a singles ward who was letting everybody stay and not transition to the mid singles ward. And they find there was a new bishopric that switched, and so they encouraged everybody to come to the mid singles ward. And so I think that, yeah,
like,
so
all right,
I think that helped
time to leave,
too.
guys.
Yeah, it's time.
Well, the church kind of has, they're well aware of the mid singles program, mainly because, and kudos to yourself, once you hit 30, if you don't graduate, some people put it, or whatever, if you're not married by that point and you leave a singles ward, there's a huge cliff that a lot of people just drop off of. I'm preaching to the choir. I know you're already aware of this, but there's other people who don't. And the church knows this. They know statistically, if there's one thing the church is good at, it's looking at numbers, retention, all of that kind of stuff. And people just, for me, I got divorced right towards the end of being in my late 20s. And then I hit that 30, kind of like time to move on. And so I was kind of recycled off a cliff sort of thing, right? So I know there's a ton of members that are just like, I'm out, it doesn't work for me. It's embarrassing for me to make that transition. So I don't want to do it. I just don't want to deal with it. And the church is well aware of this. And I think the hard part is you have church leaders, especially in like a stake presidency or something, because a lot of times those guys, they've been married, right? Like they went on their mission, they came home, they got married, and things worked. Maybe they've had some problems, but they're still married to the same person. They haven't experienced these things. They didn't go through that 30-year drop off, right? And so they don't get it. Like they don't connect with people. And that's a problem because the church understands from a statistical standpoint, but from a logistical standpoint, where it's like, hey, walk in my shoes a little bit and feel how that feels. You get a lot of people that you're like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. And you're sitting there like clamping the hammer down on me. And we're trying to build something here and it doesn't work. I'm speaking out of experience on this because we went down that road. But then you have some leaders who are like, I get it. I haven't experienced it. I can't empathize, but I can sympathize. And so I'm all for this. What do you need? And I love those guys. Yeah. So there's kind of a little bit of both, I guess, but hopefully, obviously in your situation, more that are helpful than hurtful. So
yeah, I was really lucky. I think that I was really lucky in my leadership. Like I had a lot of leaders, and even to this day, who are very supportive of me, who are very mindful of me. And I'm also one of those people who I will make a place for myself. And I know I have a lot of friends who don't feel that they want to be included and they want someone to bring them in and they want which I understand. But I was just never, I think just from growing up, I kind of had to decide for myself whether or not I would come to church. I had, I was bullied pretty heavily growing up. And so I had to decide if I was going to church for me, if I was going to church for someone else. And so what ended up happening is that ended up being such a strength to me, because when I did hit 30, I already knew how to do it. Like I already knew how to go to church on my own. I already knew how to meet friends on my own. I already knew how to, not internalize maybe a lot of the cultural things that sometimes people get caught up in, because it had not worked for me. And so that was in my favor. It didn't feel like it at the time, but now I look back and it's such a huge blessing in my life because I don't have the resistance that maybe a lot of people have. And because of that, I'm the one that can reach out because I'm strong enough in myself. So I can bring people in. And it's just been a really huge blessing. And I hope that it's blessing other people around me because I don't have a lot of maybe the internal hangups that people have because I don't know, maybe I dealt with mine already. I don't know how to, I don't know. I'm like that person that's like, I can't teach you how to do it. I just do it.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Well, I think it goes along with your personality. Like you just have an outgoing type of personality and, that people would be attracted to, whereas someone who might be a little more reserved or quiet might struggle. So I think you definitely, that was a huge benefit for you in this. And honestly, I think there is a strength that comes to someone when you have been bullied and you do feel like, okay, I've got to fight to kind of be here at church and I'm coming for the right reasons, not for a social aspect. And I bet you that was a huge benefit for you as well. I was bullied at church, but I was younger. I was in primary years and my family wasn't active, but I would walk to church and go anyway. And then usually come home crying because they were mean or whatever. But I think that taught me, because then I went less active for a while, but I think it gave me the strength when I began to reinvest in church that, I'm going for the right reasons. I'm going because I want to be there and I want to gain a testimony, not for the cultural acceptance that sometimes like the friends and the social aspect that sometimes comes with church versus why we should be there. So yeah, I think you probably got an inner strength from that. So.
Oh, for sure.
And this is kind of a nice transition into our topic tonight, which is working on relationships within ourselves. And so, you're talking about you kind of preparing yourself for all of these little trials that have come your way. Obviously you're a life coach too. So you have experience with this, but what did you do to get yourself kind of to that point where you're like, you know what, I'm okay?
I love that question because it forces me to think about my journey. And like I said, I struggled with anxiety and perfectionism. I had a lot going on internally while I was growing up. And the self-talk, like the voice in my head was just toxic and just so negative all the time. And I realized that it was just holding me back from all kinds of opportunities. I didn't want to, I'd go do new things, but I would kind of beat myself up if it wasn't perfect or, all of these things. And so I would talk about I'm like, oh, well, especially with dating, like nobody will ever love me. I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not, all of these things. And it was just constant. And so the messages in my brain were just so negative all the time. And so even though I was this positive, upbeat person and a lot of people, were friends, I had a lot of friends and everything, inside, I just felt so insecure about who I was just as a person. Like my self-worth was really, really low. And so I decided to go see a therapist about it. And I was going for years and I wasn't getting anywhere. Like I slowly would start to, make some headway a little bit, but I still had that negative voice in my head. And so I went to another therapist who did this group class, and she started talking about how to change our thoughts. And for a while she had me do a thought journal where I wrote down the thoughts that I was thinking. And then she gave me, and this is a tool that I use with my clients too. She gave me a rubber band. And so you put the rubber band on your wrist, and then throughout the day, just to become aware, this is an awareness exercise about how you talk to yourself. Every time you think something that is harmful about yourself, then you just snap the
The rubber
little rubber band, and you just say stop thought. And what it does is it stops your brain from, spiraling, as many of us do with these negative thoughts. And that was like my first taste of being aware of what I was thinking, and that I could change that. And our prefrontal cortex can do that for us. A lot of times we think that the thoughts that we have just appear and that we don't really have control over them. I know growing up, I wasn't taught how to think or how to change my thoughts, or that I could be in control of my thoughts. And so once I understood that piece, that I could change the things that I was thinking, and not in that like pop psychology way of just like think happy thoughts and, all of that, but just that I could literally condition my brain to think differently, and that I could give a lot more self-compassion to myself. And over the years, and it took a couple of years, then that voice inside my head became one of self-compassion, because I was training it to be compassionate to me. Anytime I had a negative thought, I would respond to something that was empathetic or something that was kind. Or anytime it was irrational, like so-and-so didn't look at me and they must hate me, I could turn it around and be like, maybe they just didn't see you, So it was a lot of inner dialogue with myself. But I am the example of what's possible in terms of how you can feel about yourself. And I love that I had to go through that, because if I hadn't, I probably would still be where I am and not, the person that I am today. So I think awareness about just how you think is probably where I would start. Just being aware of your thinking, like what you say to yourself. It's kind of an interesting exercise, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing that was a good exercise for me when I was coming out of my divorce, and it was kind of a toxic relationship. And so there was a lot of negative self-talk out of like just self-preservation, right? I'd rather already think badly about myself, so that if my significant other decided to rip into me, I was like, yep, I agree with you. I'm already thinking that way. And then it wasn't so painful to be walking around thinking you're a great person and then get crushed by somebody. So it took a lot of time to get over that too. So, but another thing that also that I had to work on too was like the outward appearance. Like sometimes an outward appearance can play a role, because, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. You've got to, you always hear that saying, like, can you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning? Like, are you going to be able to do that? And I think that plays a big role too in self-talk. I mean, you could talk a really good talk inside, but if you're not working on anything on the outside, and I think, if I had a big ugly beard and I didn't dress nice and my hair was all crazy and I'm like, I'm really trying to work on myself. I don't know do you ever see that do you ever coach that kind of thing too? Like working with people to improve like their outer world?
I think what happens, at least it depends on the person, right? Sometimes people start changing the outside, and it's kind of what gives them the impetus to change the inside. And then some people need to change their thinking so that they can change the outside.
Right.
And I think it just kind of depends on where you are in that journey and what you need. I mean, I've struggled with weight issues and an eating disorder, and I have a lot of things that I'm still working through. And so when it comes to like, well, can you have positive self-talk if you don't necessarily love what you see in the mirror? Well, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that I mean, do I want to take care of myself? Sure, absolutely. But am I going to be like a supermodel? Probably never. So I think
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little secret. Like this will surprise you. But so probably about 20 years ago, when my significant my wife at the time had her first affair, it crushed me. And I'll tell you what I look like. I was 240 pounds. So I'm 5'8". I'm just 240 pounds. I had a pant size waist of 42 inches. Like I was big.
Mm-hmm.
And when she had that affair, like inside, rather than kind of like I still had that, like, you're ugly and you're a jerk and why would you not have an affair? Look at you, you're a fat slob. Like that was like the self-talk that was in my head. But I made a correction on the outside. Like I decided I was going to just lose weight. I went on the Atkins diet. I started jogging. I went to the gym and, I started changing those habits. And it was amazing. I lost like 55 pounds and like everybody was like, holy crap, and that really did help the self-talk because then I was like, okay, that was something I thought the reason why I got cheated on was because I wasn't attractive. Like that was my issue. So that's why I bring that up, because sometimes you see people who go through divorces and they go through drastic changes. Like maybe they lose a lot of weight or they hit the gym or they're now into Spartan races and they're, running on the weekends every weekend or what. But I don't know, that was something that happened to me. Like I thought my outward appearance was the reason why. And so I don't know if you run into that with anybody.
I think they're all connected. And like I said, like that's the experience that you needed to have to get to that place. I mean, other people, it just it kind of depends. Like I come from the philosophy that the events that happen in our lives are neutral. So it's our reaction to our thoughts about those events that shape our destiny, basically. So, I mean, you could look at, let's say, like your wife had an affair. Well, you chose to think, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to change who I'm becoming. Well, somebody else might say my wife had an affair and be like, oh, good, now I can leave, or now I can, it's like everybody has a different reaction to that same experience. And so once I learned that, then it just kind of shaped like the way I looked at the world, and I didn't take things, I don't know. I think a lot of times people change based on their circumstances, like, experiences that they've had or things like that. But really, it's the way that you're looking at that experience. And a lot of people would be like, no, I don't agree with that. But they don't have to. But there's one of the stories that, and I love this story. It's based on the like a Taoist parable, and it's called The Man and the Horse. Have you guys heard this before? Where the man, he has a farm, and he and his son have a horse that helps them work on the farm. And one day the horse runs away, and the neighbors come over and they say, "Oh, that's so terrible. You lost your horse." And the man says, well, who's to say what is good or what is bad? And so the neighbors kind of leave perplexed. And so the next day, the horse returns and brings other wild horses. So the neighbors come over and they say, oh, you have more horses now. They can help you with your work. You don't have to be so tired anymore. And the man says, well, who's to say what is good or what is bad? And the neighbors go away. And then one day the son is trying to, train one of these horses because they were wild, and he falls and he breaks his leg. And so the neighbors come over and they say, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to work? Your son broke his leg. And he says, well, who's to say what is good or what is bad? And so the neighbors leave. And then the general from the army comes, and they're drafting men for battle. And he's too old, so they don't take him, but his son has a broken leg, so they don't take him either. And the neighbors come over and they say, oh, you're so lucky, your son didn't have to go to war. And the man says, who's to say what is good or what is bad? And so understanding that philosophy has really shaped my life, because there have been a lot of situations that I could look at as being, really bad or really good, depending on it. And I really believe that every circumstance that we find ourselves in is going to have both in it, like negative and positive, and it's all working together for our good. And so I think it's easy for us sometimes to get bogged down by situations that we feel are painful. And those emotions are absolutely valid, but it's our thoughts about that situation that really shape how we react to it rather than the situation itself. A lot of times people feel like, oh, I'm not dating anybody, so if I move, then maybe I'll, find someone, or, oh, I'm not, all of these things that I'm not this, or I'm not that, or cutting out toxic people from our lives, that like, if we cut out the toxic person, then our life will be better. Well, we still have those, triggers. If we don't learn how to deal with those triggers, then it's going to be another person that comes along and, makes us upset. So I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just a different philosophy that's out there, but it's really worked for a lot of people. And I am one of them.
Have you ever heard of the Solomon Island curse before?
No, what's that?
So you know what the Solomon Islands are, right?
Reminds me.
If you're looking at like Australia, we're kind of like, what is that, northeast kind of corner, sort of South Pacific.
Yeah.
So they do a kind of an interesting thing, and this is going to go into like a couple other studies as well. But so when they're chopping down a tree, and it's like a big tree that's kind of stubborn, and they're having problems with it, they do this thing where they say it's going to like, we're going to curse the tree. And so what they'll do is they'll like start screaming, like they'll get everyone together and scream like negative words at the tree. And you think, well, that sounds kind of silly, right? Like to me, I'd be like, all right, great. I need to get a stump grinder or something and go rent some equipment and just get the sucker out of here. But apparently this is something in their culture that has had effect for quite a while. And they believe that it can actually kill the tree and help them get rid of that tree. So I know, have you ever seen any of the studies on plants and what they do when they talk to plants, or even water crystals? There's a Japanese study on water crystals that if you speak to water crystals a certain way, like the crystals will form properly. They like form these beautiful patterns. Like you would see a snowflake, right? Something that you cut out like in elementary school and it looks all pretty and symmetrical. But if you speak negatively to it, it's like all malformed and it's like eroded. And same thing with plants, where they did a study where they took a plant and they stuck it in like 3 different rooms, right? One room, they actually spoke to the plant like kind words, like, boy, you look beautiful today. You're such a great little plant. And you're thinking, okay, this is kind of silly, right? This is nonsense, but whatever. So in one room, they spoke kindly to the plant. The next room, they spoke negatively to the plant. And the third room was just quiet. Obviously, which room did the plant grow the fastest in? The one that had the kind words. Yeah. There's just a power in that.
There's a huge power in our words. And I did a science project. I used to homeschool my kids years ago. And we did this science project where you took these 2 jars of rice and
Did you talk to the jars of rice?
Yeah. And so you'd have to talk to these jars of rice and you had to put them in the same type of atmosphere and stuff. And you had to say mean things to the one jar and nice things to the other. And it was miraculous. I swear, like the mean jar, like molded and got gross and all disgusting. And the nice jar did not. And I was trying to help my kids see not only like it was cool science wise, but like the Lord created everything with his word. He said things and it came about. And I think we highly underestimate the power of speaking and what it has like affects like all of us and in nature. And so I think it's a good testament to how we need to control the things we say and try to be as kind as possible. But on a second note, I was just going to kind of back up just 1 second. So your neutral stance, where you're saying if you're neutral, you can choose your direction on that. And I totally think I agree with you almost 100% on that, because I think most situations that is definitely the case. And I think that even if it's a bad situation, you can kind of try to look for the good, or at least learn from it to where it becomes there's something positive that does come out of it. I'm just really sensitive, and I'm just kind of like a disclaimer here. Like I'm really sensitive to this subject just because I feel bad for those who were raped or molested or like sex trafficked. I feel for those people, because I don't know if you could look at this and say, this was for my good and how can I make this better? So I think for the most part, absolutely. I think when things come our way, they can be for our good. And I'm not saying they can't learn from those horrific experiences, but I just am a little sensitive on saying like everything happens for the good or for your good. And so, but with that, so cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm sure, have you heard of that before? Obviously, that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Self-talk and how you learn how to talk to yourself to help adjust the way you view life. So do you use those type of techniques like the cognitive behavioral therapy in your life coaching, or do you suggest people maybe go to a licensed therapist for something like that, or how would you?
So with life coaching, I'm very present and future focused.
Okay.
Anything that comes up with dealing with, residual trauma issues, things like that, I'm always going to refer out because I think there's some unpacking that needs to happen.
Right.
Now, there's in theory, like everything that I teach as a life coach, you can use to work on those traumatic experiences.
Right.
But I think, especially if you struggle with, mental health issues in any way, shape, or form, that you're going to want to go talk to somebody and get you to like a baseline, because sometimes people are just so low or they've had such traumatic experiences that they need somebody who can walk them through that process to get them to where they need to be to function.
Right.
I mean, and so in that respect, I always refer out, but I think in terms of just like everyday examples of, how I can change my life and how I can use my thinking to change things that are, around me. Well, when you talked about, trauma and things like that, I don't think that there's anything like, can you turn that into a good experience? That depends on you. But like, for example, if the circumstance was somebody, let's say that because racism exists, let's say someone who's a person of color has an experience where they experience microaggressions at the hands of somebody else. Somebody says, "Can I touch your hair?" And you're like, "No,
Right.
absolutely not." Right.
Right.
And so is that a good experience? No, but can you change your thinking to decide how you want to show up to that experience?
Right.
And how you want to handle that, and have that. Absolutely. And so I feel that anything in our lives, it's the same. Like, no matter how traumatic the event, you can look back on, like, I think of my own, like, my childhood was really challenging. And looking back now, I choose to focus on what I know was right.
Right.
Rather than living in kind of like this victim mentality that I was carrying around for so long. And I'm not saying I don't want that to minimize in any way any of the trauma that people experience in like now, or abuse or anything like that. I'm very well versed in what's out there in terms of pain for people. But I do feel that sometimes we want to, sometimes we'll take more of a like victim role as self-preservation or for whatever reason, and
self-gain all
yeah,
too often
just,
nowadays. A good excuse.
Yeah,
to kind of move forward
whatever.
as the victim.
Exactly, like whatever the reason, or sometimes it's inherited or learned. It's like a learned
Yep.
behavior. I mean, there's lots of different ways that people get to that point. But my whole point is that the way that you talk to yourself, just like with those plants, is how you're going to show up in the world.
Right.
So if you, like, some people, it's like the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Some people have really positive they're willing to make mistakes. They're willing to fail about certain aspects of their lives. And then others, they're like, no, I'm dumb. I'm stupid. I'm never going to do that. I'm not. And so you can be a lot, you can have a lot of negative thinking about a lot of different things. And that's why I think sometimes when we look at like pop psychology, it's like all or nothing, positive. It's either positive or it's negative. It's not that. Like the whole point of being human is that we experience good and bad, that we hurt and that we're happy.
And
like,
that there's a process, right? Like, I feel like what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you will validate that someone who's gone through trauma needs to actually process that and have to deal with all the trauma with it. But once you're kind of at the other end, you're able to look back and be like, yeah, that was horrific, but this is what I've learned from it. And I can move forward in a positive manner with a positive outlook and not act or not feel the victim for the rest of my life, making it like literally ruin the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And that goes to the next point. Like our thoughts, the chemicals in our brain literally create the vibrations in our body that become our feelings. And so I think a lot of times people want to separate those two things. But if I have this thought that, oh, I'm alone again on Valentine's Day. Of course I'm alone again on Valentine's Day. Well, how am I going to feel?
Right.
Terrible. Right.
And then you create a Galentine's Day and go out with your friends.
Exactly. So, but if I approach it and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Galentine's Day. And that's what I did. I texted all my girlfriends and I told them all the things that I loved about them. And I thought, it's the circumstance, it's Valentine's Day, right? We can choose. And then I felt great after, Valentine's Day was no problem. I got C's candy for myself and flowers. Like I had a great Valentine's Day. And so.
Did you wrap it so you could like open it up and be like, I'm so surprised at this present for myself. It's awesome. Okay.
So the line at C's was really long, so I didn't, but I have done that in the past.
And that's like, look at me.
Lots of hugs, like lots of self-hugging and lots of self-adoration.
But I think it's really important if you, and I think I mentioned this too in a video that I had on my Facebook page, is that you can be sad about, what people aren't doing for you, or you can give yourself what other people aren't. And so I definitely fall in the latter category. I think it's really important as a single person who lives by themselves. I mean, I live with family, but like as a single person, that it's really, really important to, so many of us are searching for someone to just give us validation or give us security or give us, something that we feel that in order to be worthy, that somebody else has to give us. And I think that goes into my next point about, having that resilience for yourself. A lot of that means that you have to fill your bucket. And ironically, once you do, a lot of times that's when people do start, reaching out. That's when people do start wanting to do things for you. And then you just get to this point where you're so secure in who you are, you can accept what they give you, but it's not going to change the worth that you already feel you have. And so I think that really, they all go hand in hand, but it's just so important. I get on these Facebook pages and I'm pretty blunt. Like I said, I've been single since I was 18. So I have a lot of thoughts about all the same things that I see every day. And so I'll go in and I'll tell people about it. They don't agree a lot of the time. They want to kind of wallow in their own misery. But I mean, at some point you have to decide, like, who is this for? Is this for me? Or am I just going to like wander around aimlessly hoping that someone will love me, but nobody will until, I feel like I have a life worth living.
So let's take some of what you're saying and let's apply it to like these Facebook groups, like you're talking, the singles scene, right?
The singles scene.
So you've got a lot of people coming off of divorces or having never been married. And there is a lot of pain there, a lot of hurt, right? Mm-hmm. And if I were to just go up to somebody and say, hey, You just need to think positively. That would probably not go over so well, right? So I'm just kind of thinking back, like, one of the things that I normally get into, or I don't get into it, but I see it, people getting into it on the Facebook groups, are sort of what we call the battle of the sexes, right? It's people who, like, gosh, women do this or men do that. And there's all these little kind of underhanded swipes at each other, right? And that comes from a place of pain, maybe a place of like sad experience, right? Like maybe that's what their ex did, or that's the experiences that they've had. So when somebody comes to you as a life coach and they're like, I've just gone through this divorce that's just rocked me, right? What's step one for you? Where do you start leading this person?
So I would have them just give me, it's called a thought download. And they basically just tell me all of what they're thinking. So for 5 minutes, I'll just listen to their experience, what they're going through, and I'll look at, different elements of what they're trying to say. And sometimes it's in conjunction with like a specific event. Sometimes it's just like a life experience feeling. And then I'll choose like one event or one circumstance that really resonates with them. And it has to be something that can be proven in a court of law. So if somebody says, oh, my ex was so mean to me, they said blah, blah, blah. Well, I'll put down my ex said, and then the exact things that they'd said. And then we'll talk about like, well, how did you feel when your ex said that? And then they'll give me the feeling. And then I'll ask them like, what was going through your mind when you were feeling that? Or what kind of thought did you have? And then they'd tell me that. And then I'd ask them, and this is all like to help build awareness, because I think awareness is where we always need to start when we're trying to heal, or if we're trying to change, or we're trying to, understand ourselves. We have to be aware of the situation. And a lot of times we're not. We're just going about our lives thinking and feeling and thinking that it just happens, that we don't have any control over that. And
that's
so
the victim mentality.
Well, in life and in general, I think a lot of times we don't realize that, when things come at us, that we can choose how we want to react. Now, like, let's say, for example, my dad passes away. Well, I'm going to be devastated, right? I'm not going to think happy thoughts about that. I'm going to mourn his passing. But it's my thoughts about my dad dying, not my dad dying, that causes me to feel bad. Because some people had terrible relationships with their dad, and they may be grateful that their dad passed away, right? So it's just being able to recognize in the moment, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. And so I would ask them, like, what are you doing because you're feeling this way? Like, how are you showing up? And then they would, tell me, is it, or maybe they're not doing anything at all. Maybe they're frozen or paralyzed, with choice or fear or whatever. And so we talk about that. And then I'd say, well, what is this result creating for you right now in your life? And then we talk about what that result would be. And then once they have it, and we've talked about kind of what's going on, a lot of times people just don't recognize that that's what's happening, because we're not, thinking through this process. So we can talk about it. And a lot of times it's just a starting off point that brings up other things too. And it'll a lot of times get to the real root of people's struggles. And more often than not, it comes down to an issue with self-worth. People just don't feel their worth, going after the new job or going after the new relationship, or, whatever the internal struggle is. They don't feel that they're capable in some aspect of how they feel about themselves or how they feel about a situation. And
I
so
think that's something big in the singles world where they'll be like, you know what? they're not going to like me anyway, so I'm not even going to go for it. I can see that would be like a message.
That could definitely happen. I
Or
think
rejection. Like when people get rejected, they say,
yeah.
I knew it. I mean, nobody's going to ever love me again. I'm such a loser. And, I'm going to give up on the dating scene,
And meanwhile, they're bleeding all over every thread about, how life is hard and they're a loser. And then they wonder why.
They wonder why someone's not like, oh.
Well, what's funny is you said something earlier that I really agree with, is that all that negative stuff, like the energy you emit, like if you're just a negative, just a bad person inside, like it comes out. Like even animals, like a dog will growl at some guy in the street, and I'll walk by the same dog and they won't growl at me. So it's like, what is that dog sensing that, and I really do think that people put out that energy. And so I
helps
teach,
when you have bacon in your pocket. You just keep a little bacon in your pocket. You're good.
Yeah, I carry around bacon, so all the girls are like, he's a nice guy. Right. My dog loves him. No,
it's tricks right there.
Well, I think that really brings up a great point too, because I remember when I was younger and I was really kind of caught up in, I had all of my anxiety stuff, and babies would cry every time I went to go hold them, and dogs would bark at me. So you're not far off, but I was so like caught up in myself, and it really is an energetic thing. Because I was like trying so hard to like control, the things around me and be perfect and do all of the right things. And in that process, I really was pushing people away. In that, it's so ironic. Like I was trying so hard to be what everybody wanted me to be, and yet, nobody wanted to be with me.
It is a mental thing. You do have to, once you start to, it's like when I started changing like my self-talk and it started to really get that under control and started to change my mindset and be more positive, like relationships got better. Like it was easier to meet people. Like women women weren't like, oh, he's a creeper. Like they're all of a sudden like, hey, there's something interesting about this guy. Like I was putting out the right energy. I don't know. Yeah. But I teach jujitsu. I've been teaching it for a while, but I've been practicing for a while. But something that I always talk about when I teach this is that, I mean, yeah, you could get good at jujitsu, but what you're really good at is the confidence, the confidence that when you're walking down the street and you might see some hoodlums on the corner and maybe they're giving you the eyeball, that if you feel confident in your ability to defend yourself, that energy gets put out in the universe. And it's like lions in the countryside, right? They don't go after the leader of the pack. They don't say, hey, that giant bull right there, I'm going to take him down. No, they don't say that. They look for the weaklings in the herd and they take them down. And bad guys do that. I mean, bad guys look for the easy mark. They look for the person who's vulnerable, the person who's willing to, that's easy, and they're not going to get, because who wants to take on the big guy? They might get hurt. They might get killed. So I always tell people, when you train, you actually build that confidence inside so that when you walk down the street, people sense it and they're like, don't mess with that guy. And it's true. I mean, in my job, I work with a lot of guys in different branches of government. And sometimes I've worked with like those Navy SEAL guys, right? And you'll never know they're Navy SEAL because a lot of times they're wearing plain clothes when they come to meetings. But when they walk in the room, you just know, like, they'll be like, this guy, you're like, okay, kind of nerdy. He's a analyst or whatever. Then three guys walk in and they're just, short guys, but you're like, man, there's something radiating about these guys. Like they could kill me with their bare hands. I could just feel it. Like they are trained, they are confident. They walk in the room and you're like, those are the 3 Navy SEALs. I know it. Like of all this 10 guys in the room, those 3 guys are the Navy SEAls. You sense that the energy flowing out of them. And I think that what you're trying to say is if you can program inside you confidence and not have negative self-talk, that just radiates and everybody just wants to be around you.
Well, what's so fascinating is that the more secure we become in ourselves, absolutely, like that's the vibe we're going to give off. And whether it happens because they are Navy SEALs or know jujitsu or are really confident in just their worth as a person. I think anything that allows you to become more or become the you that you want to create. Of course, everybody like
confidence to talk to a girl. Like, there's probably guys in the audience right now going, I would never walk up to a woman in a grocery store and start talking to her. Like, no way. I mean, and then there's other guys who are like, what's the problem? I'll walk up there and start chit chatting about Cheerios. Be like, hey, that's a good box of Cheerios right there. I've had it.
Cheerios.
Well, yeah, they got all kinds of new flavors now, so you gotta pick the right brand new one.
Yeah.
You know, like
I met my wife.
Really good.
I met my wife over cherry Cheerios. It was amazing.
You just never know, right? You never know.
Well, you bring up a good point, because so much of our unwillingness to do something or to push ourselves is fear of failure.
Yep.
So whether it's rejection, or whether it's looking silly in front of someone, or whether, they don't want to take a risk. I mean, if we can learn how to fail forward powerfully, I mean, what could limit us?
Fail forward powerfully.
Just like own it, like own the failure. And
embrace the suck and get better.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
well, then let me ask you a question about this.
Okay.
So if you're failing forward, right? If you're it's that fear of rejection, right? That kind of holds us back. Mm-hmm. I see this a lot in the groups, right? Especially when it comes to like girl ask guy, right? So how have you been finding guys? Like, have you asked any guys out? Like, you've got your Galentine's Day, right? But do you ever go like, hey, you know what? This is like girl ask guy month. I'm going to go for it. And if I fail 100 times, I'm going to fail 100 times.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a good point. I have. In fact, every year for my birthday, I try and at least like go out on a date. Like, that's kind of like what I want to do for my birthday, is like go out on a date. And I have asked guys before. Mm-hmm. I kind of have a habit of I end up kind of like liking my friends. And so,
that's okay.
I
get friend zoned.
I express my, my interest in it. It's so funny because I did tell one of my guy friends that, I was interested in him. He's like, I don't think we'd be a good match. And I'm like, okay. So I was a little heartbroken, but he was absolutely right. He's still one of my best friends to this day, and his wife is my best friend. So I think, just being open and being like, yeah, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to, see, what do you think?
I think that's the key, is that I think a good foundation of a friendship. So keep asking your friends, because I'm a personal believer that like having that good foundation of a solid friendship where you just feel really comfortable with somebody and then bolt on the romance and the intimacy. Yeah. I think that's the best mixture, because I was the opposite. Like, I jumped in like hot and heavy with my wife, and I was 22. What did I know? Like, we're making out all the time, or, it's like 6 months later, we're married. And then, like 9 months later, we got our first kid. So it was like, woo. And then I was like, holy crap. Like, we fight all the time, and she's crazy and all this stuff. And I think it's good to have that friendship and go, you know what? If we're having a bad day and I don't quite feel romantic with you, you know what? We're still friends. We still talk and hang out today. And then tomorrow, when we're feeling better, we talk our problems out, then we're back to, romance. But I don't know. Yeah. Keep asking.
Yeah. Well, I think it brings up a really good point. I mean, the reason why I'm friends with the people that I'm friends with is because they treat me well. We have a good relationship. Like, why wouldn't you want a
marriage?
Exactly. And so here, I think in my own life, my guy friends have been so amazing that anybody who has come and tried to like make it happen with me romantically, they're not even like, they don't even treat me as well as my friends. And so that's kind of, my friends have set a really high bar, and they're all amazing people. I'm really grateful for them. But it's kind of been a little challenging in the dating department, because
Because you're comparing them.
I'm comparing.
Well, everybody's jumping in full bore. You got to tell those guys, hey, yo, bro, slow your roll. Like we got to take this one step at a time. Like, yeah, there's Netflix and chill on our second dates. Nah, that's not gonna happen.
No Netflix and chilling. No.
So
Well, I will say that, like, you know, I've seen a lot of people go through the dating scene, and some complain like, I don't have enough dates. We see that a lot on the Facebook groups. And there's nothing worse than somebody who is going to be complaining all the time or not out making it happen. Everybody has a magnetic personality. I've said it on here a million times before. It just depends what you're going to attract, right? So to me, I've seen people who are just like the life of the party, like, hey, I'm like super confident. And there is a big difference between confidence and fake confidence, where somebody's out there and they're trying to fake it, you know, like, hey, look at me. And then behind the scenes, they're like shriveled up mess. Like, just be happy with who you are, but be happy and make it happen. And that attracts people to them. It's kind of like this, just sort of this vortex that just, they suck people in. Like, I want to be near this person. And so, you know, when I see somebody who's kind of figured out this formula, so to speak, kind of the question that always comes to my mind is like, you've got the tools, like, you know, do you want to make it happen? Are you going out and like applying the tools? Because to be honest with you, right? Like, what is the old saying? Like, people become counselors because they're the ones that need the counseling the most or something, right?
Yeah.
And so
there's a few of those. It's true.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the old adage. So
Or they spend a lot of time looking stuff up so much about themselves. They're reading so much about psychology, like, I shouldn't major in this.
Right.
Or they benefited from it. I mean,
they benefit from it. They're like, I should do this for
I
a
want to
living.
help someone else.
But you can get so comfortable coaching other people and telling them what to do. It's like, all right, you know, coach, play, you know, play the game. Show me how it's done.
Coach yourself.
That's right.
And that's the thing, is that what I love about coaching, and ideally in therapy, it's like this too, is that I'm a mirror, right? So people share their things, their, you know, concerns with me, or the things that they're struggling with, and I reflect back, this is what I'm seeing. And a lot of times people are like, I never noticed that, or I never thought about it that way. And then when they have that awareness, and then they have those tools, like, you know, having more positive self-talk within their brains, and not being afraid of failure, and doing all that, they do it on their own. Right. And I mean, I would never, and I feel like this in just life in general, if I'm not willing to do it, I'm not going to tell anybody else they should.
Sure. Well, that's just hypocrisy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm totally willing to do everything that
everything you can.
all the tools.
Let me chime in on what Everett was saying though. Let me give a little piece of self-talk advice, a little piece of phrasing the guys and girls can say in their mind. Okay, we're all on this Facebook group that says LDS singles, right? Yeah. There's a reason we're all there. Okay. So your confidence level already is up one level, because if you DM somebody, or you make a comment and you're trying to make a connection on those groups, you don't have to think like, oh, I'm going to get turned down. The girl's going to be like, oh, I'm only here for, you know, the social aspect of it. That's not happening. Like if you're there for the social aspect, let's create another Facebook called LDS Friends. And you go there and you go find friends. But this is a singles group. Right now, it's a singles group. So those guys and girls out there have the confidence to reach out, make contacts. Don't be afraid, because already we're there for a reason. Everybody's in the group for a reason. We're all single. We don't want to be single anymore. Okay. So right there, your level's rising up, and you should be self-talking yourself into reaching out to people in the group.
Well, I think that's a great point, because it goes back to being, not afraid of failure. Like, let's say that there was this guy created this game, and it's called like the Rejection game or something. He was having a hard time. He didn't like that he was having such a hard time dealing with rejection, so he wanted to get over it. And so he would choose this card and he had to do whatever it said on the card. And usually it was something embarrassing or something where he had to ask somebody a question. And if they told him no, then that counted as like the point or, whatever in how the game works. I could look it up and find out. But I thought that was such a great idea. If we go in being excited to fail, then we could DM 50 people and be like,
Right.
oh, great. 5 of you we had a decent conversation with, 45 did not answer me, but 5 people still answered.
5 did. Because I was
Yeah.
thinking that how it says in the scriptures where, if the Lord wants you to see your weaknesses so he can make them your strengths. And I think this is the same scenario. Like if we're willing to recognize our weaknesses and say, hey, okay, maybe I'm shy or whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to view as a weakness, but we don't look at them like it's something that just needs to be hidden and like, oh, poor me. But we like say, okay, well, I've got this, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to do it, make it better. I'm going to try to make these areas stronger. And because that gives you confidence, that gives you an aura that you're just trying to be positive and looking for good. And I think that's a benefit if we can just be like, don't get hung up on your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Like the Lord says, just use him to make them your strengths and move forward.
I think that's a really important point too, but also with that, I think a lot of times people are like, I'm going to change everything and I'm going to become this amazing person. And it's like, no, that's not how it works, because that's when people massively fail and then they don't ever try again. So what I love is just this this incremental, just one little step. I think a lot of times we feel like we have to, if we're going to be a runner, we have to run a marathon. Like, how about just running to the next street light? Like, how about, because a lot of times we don't think that it's worth it unless we do the big thing. But I mean, if we look at the theory of relativity, it's like an object in rest will stay at rest and an object in motion will stay in motion. Well, that momentum is the hardest part. It's like just getting going, I think, is the hardest part to just starting. And I feel like people don't give themselves enough credit for that. And so because they didn't do the marathon, they feel like, oh, this light post isn't worth anything. But really, that's the hardest part, right? It's just getting started and like doing it every day. And I wish people gave themselves more credit for that, because I think it would give them the desire to keep going like a little further and a little further. And that's where change really happens. It's not in these grand gestures. It's in this, little bit at a time that really makes it not only worthwhile, but manageable. I mean, that's where we start seeing success.
There's kind of like the midlife crisis, but, there's a kind of like a post-divorce crisis in a way as well, where people come out of these traumatic situations and they want to like fix the pain, right? Like you don't want that pain being there. It hurts. I want it to go away. Yeah. And sometimes that manifests itself in people trying to like put forth this persona of like, hey guys, look at me. Everything's great. My life is good. Yeah, I moved on. I'm totally ready. It's like, okay, wait, let's hit the brakes here a little bit. Like, let's be who you really are. It's okay to embrace the pain. Mm-hmm. I would much rather have someone who's real in that situation versus somebody who's just like trying to fake their way to the next relationship and get past that pain and skip it,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really great point, because bringing up fear, I mean, so many of us are afraid of a feeling. And really, when we think about like worst case scenarios, when we have to acknowledge pain, what's the worst case scenario? It's we feel terrible for a while, we move through it, and then we're over it. But a lot of people are so afraid of that if they feel it, then they're just going to have to keep feeling it again and again, like it's not going to resolve itself. But we really do have to let those feelings, because they're chemicals, like we really do have to let them process through our bodies. And until we just sit with that and feel it, I mean, it's just going to keep coming up until we do. And that brings a great point to people who are struggling with, stressful situations like coming out of a divorce and wanting to change all of the things. I think people are, again, afraid of, sitting with it. And I get that. Like, I totally understand why. But again, like, just try it and see. You might feel better.
Well, there's two memories. Like when I did therapy after my divorce, and what the therapist was talking about is that there's actually two memories that form in your brain. So let's just take a car accident, for example, right? So you get in a really bad car accident, you don't die, you don't get really badly injured, but just the whole scariness of the sound and the cars crashing and the police coming, and for weeks after that, like you're just nervous driving the car, and you hear screeching tires and you flinch up, and every time you see a car coming out of a driveway, you freak out, right? I'm going to get another accident. And what that is she said that is your emotional memory. And sometimes when you start thinking about the accident, it takes about maybe 5 minutes, like you start reminiscing about the accident, then it triggers the emotional memory to come back, and then you re-traumatize yourself. And so she was saying was, you got a timer, like the minute you start thinking about your wife cheating on you, don't play it out. Don't be like, oh, she went out there, she was with this guy, and then she was in bed, and oh my gosh, and he was sleeping with her and having sex, and then the emotions well up, and you're like, oh, I'm crushed again, right? And she's saying you can't do that. Like if your mind starts going, oh yeah, I wonder if when she went to the gym, she really didn't go to the gym and she was with some dude, and then you start playing that thing, and then all the emotions come up, you just triggered that emotional memory, and then you re-traumatize yourself again. So I think what she was saying is you got to stop the memory. You've got to control the memory. And she says, when it comes in your mind, you got to shoot away, because it takes about 2 to 5 minutes when that emotional memory comes, and you're right back in the car accident again.
And that's a great point. And that's what I love about the more we learn about our brain. Like our prefrontal cortex can come in and just stop that thought at the pass and change it around, right? Like, or at least stop it so that we don't spiral. And that's what I love about awareness, because our prefrontal cortex is like our higher self, and it wants the best for us. And it's kind of like our parent in a way. Like it can tell us to stop, or to, all of the things when we want our best for ourselves is coming from our prefrontal cortex. When we go to sleep at night and we're like, yeah, I'm totally going to wake up and run in the morning. That's our prefrontal cortex, super excited because it wants the best for us. And so with that awareness, if we know that we're going to be triggered by that type of a thought or a feeling, and that it can hijack our brain, then it's like that stop thought, activity I had with the rubber band. It gives pause to the thought process in our brain. And so then we have about, I think science has found, I think it's like 3 to 4 seconds that we have, when we want to do something good. If we don't act on it, like it's gone. It's the same thing with our thoughts. If we don't change it, within that 3 or 4 seconds, then it's so much easier to just.
So what I did, like the question came up about like, how do you shoo it away? And what I did when I'm driving my car, driving to work, how your mind wanders and you're just, your mind's drifting around, and it was fresh in my mind, like, oh, I got cheated on. This is horrible. Right. Yeah. And I'm driving along, and when those thoughts came into my mind, I immediately thought about like goals for the future. Like I'm going, this is a past memory. This is the past. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I go, that is behind me, and I am moving forward. I'm going to find a woman who won't cheat on me, who's going to treat me like I deserve. Like I just started thinking about the future. I'm like, that is in the rearview mirror. Don't look back. The accident's back on the road, way back there. Do I want to make a U-turn, go back and check it out again? No, I don't. It's back there. I'm not looking back in the rearview mirror. And I just had to always remind myself, because they keep coming back. It kept coming back, and I would just be driving along, and it's just that you have to force yourself to think about something else.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a really good point too, because in our brains, every time we think that painful thought and we buy into it, it's shooting chemicals that are going to keep reinforcing, those neurons, right? So in order to, I don't want to say kill the neurons, but like get those to focus on something else and go down a different pathway, we have to stop that thought to change that thinking. And
No, it's just
ultimately,
rewiring. I call it like
yeah,
software. You're reprogramming
yeah,
the software in your brain. So
exactly. You're rewiring. And so like the same case for me, when I stopped, when I changed the way I was talking to myself, I never think the same things that I was thinking, 10 years ago. It just doesn't even come up because I've rewired. And it's the same thing. It sounds like with you, you've been able to do the same.
yeah. So what we're going to do, Melissa, is we're going to open up for the crowd to come in and ask questions if they want. We'll continue to chit chat until we see the little hands pop up. For those in the audience, if you want to raise your hand, if you're on an Apple, it's Alt and Y to raise your hand and to unraise your hand. And if you're one of those goofy people on a Mac, then
well, you said if you're on an Apple and then you're on a Mac.
I know,
so if you're
like
on a Windows
and a Mac.
if you're on a Windows-based system, it's Alt Y. If you're on a Mac,
it's Alt Y. If you're on a Mac, then it's
if you're really cool and on a Mac, it's
Option
Option Y.
And you're a Mac user, you know that it's Option. All right, so then you can raise your hand and then you can ask Melissa, you can ask any of us others a question if you want. Anybody here who's on the panel, feel free to raise your hand and ask the question. But yeah, that's the hardest thing is just there's so many, the emotional memories are the things that we have to really stamp out. And I thought that was really kind of nice that there are two separate memories, because now I still think about like, oh, I can't believe she cheated on me with that dude, right? But now it doesn't traumatize me anymore. Like I think about it and then I move on. I'm like, oh yeah, that really sucked, and I just move on.
Make sure that it's actually been processed, right? We don't want to suppress.
Right.
So
no.
So make sure it's already been processed. And if it pops up, you can like smack it down, but make sure you've done.
Well, that's where the self-talk comes in. The processing is when you self-talk it. Like you talk to yourself and you're like, dude, it's her loss, man. Dude, she cheated on me. It's her loss. Like she's going to realize one day I was a great guy and she shouldn't have cheated on me. Right. So you do that self-talk to kind of coach yourself into like, I'm not a loser. She's the loser.
Yeah. We just don't want to cause suppression, because then that'll just come out in some random other way.
No, you're right. I think another thing too to remember is that when our brains they, like somebody mentioned before, like they're a computer, they're processing. And if we have things that we're working on that have been entrenched in our brains for years and years and years, that's a lot of efficiency. And our brains are so used to thinking in that pattern. And so that's why self-compassion is so important, especially if you have that awareness and just being like, you know what, here's that thought again, but I'm going to choose this. I don't need that. Thought's not serving me, or that spiral is not serving, whatever it is, because that's when we have control. We can get our prefrontal cortex involved, and then we can transition those thoughts to go down different pathways. And so I think that when I talk about self-compassion, that's really where it's key, is just being compassionate with ourselves, because a lot of times when people do get awareness, then they start beating themselves up because they're like, oh, I know better. I know this thought's not helping me. I know this isn't, this isn't serving me or whatever. And so then they think negative thoughts about the negative thoughts when it's, you know what I mean? So I'm a big preacher of self-compassion, because I feel that it heals in so many different ways. And really, when I think of myself as being compassionate to myself, I really feel like I'm activating the atonement in my life, because so many times we think of, the Savior and the atonement and healing as kind of this separate thing, but we are the people that are healing, and the Savior can only heal us as far as we'll allow him to, right? And so much of that comes in with our thinking. And it is something that we really can show love to ourselves the way that he would. And I feel like it's just a missed opportunity when we don't.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you got to cut yourself a break, and you got to tell
Yeah.
yourself, I'm cutting myself a break. Like, I got to stop beating myself up about, you know, all the stuff that goes on, you know, in my life. I got to be just like, you know what? I'm not as bad as I think I am. That's what you got to do. You got to cut yourself a break.
You got to offer yourself grace that you would give someone else. There was a lesson in church one time where they were talking about, you know, love thy neighbor as thyself, right? And we always think about it as in we love ourselves so much, make sure we love our neighbor that much. But they were turning it around saying, well, sometimes we have a hard time loving ourselves. So the Lord's also saying, you know how you love your neighbors and you do anything for them? You need to do that for yourself as well.
Exactly.
So it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we did that a little bit more, part of it, I think, with church culture, when we're taught from such a young age to serve each other and to love each other and to do all that, it becomes like this idea that that's more important than doing that for ourselves. And so accepting love from other people and loving ourselves, all of that fits into that idea. And I wish that more people, you know, spent a little time with that, because I know so many amazing people who feel like they're total crap because they're not perfect. And that's really an idea that we have to let go of if we want to be not only just human and alive and grateful, you know, for all the things we have, but just in the church as well. I feel like a lot of times we do ourselves a disservice because we're so focused on trying to, you know, do all the right things and check all the boxes when the whole process is being lost on us.
Yeah. And the truth is we can't. Like,
we
it's
never
impossible for us to be perfect. So we will always fail if that's our goal. So, okay, we've got a question from Heidi. Come on in, Heidi.
Oops. Okay.
Hey. How are you,
Melissa?
Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Good. It's good to meet you.
Me too.
I just wanted to say I really loved what you were talking about. Well, you and Corey were talking about that, like, I don't know what you were calling it, but, you know, the thought management process to keep yourself out of those trauma places in your mind so you can avoid, you know, going down that path over and over. And it's kind of funny because I was thinking about this process you're describing kind of when you were going through it, Corey, and I was like, that's kind of the process that I had to take myself through kind of in the beginning of like the separation divorce time when I and I've talked about this a little bit before, but when I had to choose, okay, do I want to go down this path that I know could send me to a place of bitterness and anger, or do I want to choose something that will bring me happiness? Because in that place, I think sometimes it's hard to believe that, yeah, we'll find a place where we'll be happy again, because it can seem really dark. I mean, there's usually a reason that we're getting a divorce or a separation, and there may be some negative that's being taken out of our life, but there are definitely negatives we're trading that for. And I just love how you guys just laid it out so perfectly. It's almost like this step-by-step process. And it was just a great reminder to me of how helpful that is in keeping us out of places where we're just going to hurt ourselves more.
Yeah, I think what I was calling it the emotional memory. So there's a physical, there's the actual memory, which is just an event that we can think about, has no consequences, like pops in your head. You're like, yeah, that happened.
What we feel,
but the more you think about it, then you make the connection from, like, when you have a car accident, like you can go back in time and think, oh, dude, I was in a car accident. It was crazy. Like, it doesn't even scare you anymore. But the more you think about, like, the glass and the glass shattering and the noises and the screeching and the screaming and body flying around and whatever. And then you're like, oh, you tapped into the emotional memory. Like you played it all out and then you just relived it all over again. Like you can't let it go that far. You can't play it out.
And it's hard to learn how to like consciously take control of our thought processes and say, no, I can't go to that place because I know that's an unhealthy place for me to go. Because I think until we kind of learn more awareness and better self-talk and just lots of other tools, we kind of almost feel like we're on that roller coaster and we're not driving it.
Yeah.
But if we can learn how to put those brakes on, which for me, I just have to consciously recognize, I know what these thoughts feel like. And I know those emotions that it's bringing to me. And I know that won't be a good place for me to go. I just have to stop myself. And it's, sometimes it's something stupid, like I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to call my sister.
Turn some music on. Like music works for me.
I'm going to do something else.
In that moment, just make sure you validate yourself. Okay, yes, I feel this way, but I'm going to go read music.
Yes,
I like. If you don't validate it, you're just going to suppress it and it's never going to go away. But if you validate and move forward, like it's processing, it's getting rid of it.
Yes.
So
and that's super important.
Habit. Yeah. And one point I wanted to make too is that I just kind of thought about this, when we are shifting those thoughts away from that brain, that pattern that we have in our brain, it really is allowing our brain to heal from that trauma. Like it really is, because we're not using those same neurological pathways. And so if we can shift it towards something else, then it's like, you know what? I'm giving my brain a break. I'm letting it heal. And then you can talk to you the way that you want to talk to you, the way you want your voice to sound, the way you want. And some people will even give theirs a name. Like my little cousin, I taught this process too about like changing her thoughts. And she named her voice Sugar Rush. That was hers. So you can name it and you don't have to, I don't know, you can shift the way that you talk to yourself. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. But one thing that I did want to make a really important point about is that the idea of a bridge thought or a transitional thought, because sometimes the thought is so big and we don't believe it. And so like, say for example, if I struggle with body image, like I hate my body. Well, I'm not going to say I love my body, when I'm trying to change my thought. I'm going to say I have a body and it's healthy, And then when you get used to that, I have a body, then you can say, I really feel strong when I work out. And then, you can build on all of those things. So it's
brilliant.
It's having that, like, what can I, kind of like what Celeste was saying about giving ourselves grace. What is a thought that I can have that is congruent with how I truly feel? And then being able to say, okay, this is me. This is the person I am now. This is the thought that I believe now. And then transition it to the next thought that maybe you weren't sure about believing before. And like incrementally until you start healing. And that happens so in such small increments. Sometimes we don't even notice it until we look back and we're like, I'm not even the same person I was anymore.
Yeah. That's so funny. That is so my favorite part of this podcast. Transitional thoughts. That's my takeaway. Thank you.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, Heidi.
Heidi.
They're awesome. I love
Appreciate that. All right. Next we have Tanya. Come on up, Tanya.
Okay, going from that thought, just transitional thought, but I think for me, the hardest part is your family, because you're making changes and you think your life is great, but you always have like your family that's coming back to you that's saying, I think you need to be doing this. And I think you need to be doing that. I think that's the hardest part, is your family doesn't always want to see you change.
Right.
They always want to kind of pull you back to where you were.
Well, because you're taking them out of their comfort zone and what they're used to, right? So if you change your patterns, then they're like, wait. What do you mean? That's not what we're used to. And it makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead, Melissa. I know you've got a lot to say on that.
Well, I was just thinking, like, we're not responsible for other people's emotions or how other people's reactions. We're only responsible for our own. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can handle the family situation. But in the meantime, what you really have to do is just be true to the thoughts that you have for you and really focus on how you're showing up and how you want to show up. And I really do feel like I kind of look at it like weight loss. Like, I've had several friends who've lost significant amounts of weight in the time that I've known them. And when I first would see them, I'm like, oh my gosh, they've lost a lot of weight. And now it's been, several years and they're just my friends. I don't remember that anymore. I don't remember them as the person that they used to be. I remember them as the person that they are now. And so I really do believe because as humans, we kind of have a hard time with change, even the people who do like change. If we just allow people to, say what they want to say or do whatever they want to do and not let it affect our progress, eventually chances are they will get used to it. They'll get used to the new you, and then it won't bother them anymore because they'll know you're still the same person, just better. And so it's allowing them to, because just like you're going through a change, they are too, because they're not used to the new you. And so having grace for them when they say the things that are not helpful and not taking it personally, just letting them, like allowing them to own their own feelings, their own emotions. Even if they try and put it on you, it has nothing to do with you. It's their emotions and it's their thoughts that they need to come to terms with, and just be a model of, these new things that you're learning. And hopefully they will see that, and if not join you or appreciate that new you, at least be like, oh, okay, well, she's not going to change. I guess I better just accept her the way she is.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I have a daughter that's actually in clinical psychology school right now.
Mm-hmm.
And out of everybody in my family, she's the only one that she's always like, Mom, just do whatever you want to do.
Right.
And, own it. And it's like, and she's right. It's the exact same thing that you're saying. And so we have these great conversations about that. She's a little bit out there because she's not LDS, but it's still interesting that you guys are coming from that same concept. But I'm talking like for instance, like my mom, is like, you need to do this and you need to stop doing running and spend more time trying to date and rather than in the gym and things like that. And it's like, it's just, so you're constantly have this battle with the people that you're closest with, that think they know best for you. So I just, and you don't want to hurt them and you want to keep your relationships, good, but it's just, sometimes those are the people that hold you back the most.
Well, are they holding you back, or is it your thought about how they're holding you back that's holding you back?
It just makes for difficult conversations because you're constantly like, Mom, I'm happy. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I have more freedom now than I've ever had. And, but you better hurry up and, you got to do these things. And it's just funny, Well,
I think along with that awareness, when she does start coming at you, you can decide. I mean, when she comes at you, what are you thinking? Like, what's a thought that you're thinking when she comes at you like that?
Her thought is that, I'm not getting younger. You should try to do more dating. My thought is that I'm confident and I'm happy with what I'm doing with my life right now. And like I say, I truly have more fun, just doing what I'm doing right now than trying to focus on figuring out, who's the next person I'm going to go on a date with. Yeah. So her thought is like, well, what are you going to do with yourself? You're getting older every day. And it's like, I lived my life. I had marriage for 24 years and I'm, if I never got married again, I still know what that experience is and I'm blessed and for it. And it's fine, so I could, not that I want to be single for the rest of my life, but I am confident and happy enough to know that I'm okay with that, but she's not okay with that.
That's true. I think that's for me, that's what I had to do to myself. Cause when I first got divorced, I was getting I was like the crazy, I was like the crazy Pepe Le Pew. I was like, I'm gonna, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be single the rest of my life. This is horrible. I want to find somebody quick. But I had to accept the fact that, like, what if I never find anybody? Am I okay with being, a single grandpa the rest of my life? Right? Can I accept that? And once I accepted that could be the possibility and I have to be okay with it, I became less stressed, less urgent, less needy. And it was more, I could be myself and be relaxed. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I accept it. I think that's what Tanya's trying to say, is that she's going to be happy no matter what happens in her life. She's not going to be stressed about it.
Well, and yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And just how to best, like, what's your thought of, like, how do you project that to your family in a sense of be okay if I'm, okay with it.
Would you mind if I coached you a little bit right now?
Sure. No, that's why I'm asking.
Okay. So your mom says you're not getting any younger.
Right.
How does that make you feel?
In that sense,
what's the first thing that comes up?
The first thing that comes up is that I had a great marriage and I'm grateful for it every day. He made choices that I wish he didn't make for us. So I know what it's like and I'm okay with that. I feel like Heavenly Father blessed me with that part of my life, and that was a gift. And I have 4 amazing children that are all doing well. And I'm okay with that. If I maybe never had kids, maybe I'd feel different. But because I have such a close relationship with my kids and they're all doing well, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so I'm going to put as your thought, I'm okay with that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So when you think that thought, I'm okay with that, how do you feel?
And I'm okay with it?
Yeah. What sensation do you have in your body? You can close your eyes and like
maybe I should be more motivated to try to move forward in relationships. I don't know.
No, just like, how do you feel? Do you feel calm? When you think the thought, I'm okay with that. Do you feel calm? Do you feel peaceful? Do you feel anxious?
I think I'm okay with it. I feel calm with it because I know of other things that I'm doing in my life that are positive for myself.
Okay. So with that calm feeling and that thought, I'm okay with that. When your mom says you're not getting any younger, what actions, like if we could put a camera in between you and your mom when you're having this conversation, what could a video camera capture you doing? Being calm and okay with that.
Probably trying to justify why I don't put myself more out there. I don't know.
Okay. Do you go back and forth? Do you fight? What exactly happens in that conversation? Do you withdraw?
Do I withdraw? No, I try to explain to her that I am happy, that I do love my job. I work with veterans, and going back to what Corey said, I love these veterans, and it's amazing how much compassion I have for them. So, and going back to what he was talking about is I can immediately tell when I'm talking to a Marine, or immediately tell when I'm talking to an E1. Mm-hmm. They exhibit that different behavior and just their demeanor and their voice. So I am very much that's a big part of my day. Mm-hmm. And so I try to explain to her, I love, just the things that I surround my life with, including my kids and the people that I have in my exercise atmosphere. I am an avid runner, so I'm okay with it. So when she tries to argue that, I kind of explain it to her, and she just says, fine, then maybe you shouldn't put yourself out there or something. And then that's how she ends it. But I think she's trying to give me that backwards psychology that a mom tries to give you.
Well, the thing that's so interesting that I'm really curious about is with that thought, I'm okay with that. And then you feel calm. When you were describing the conversation that you were having with your mom and the going back and forth and the discussion, it sounded like you were just justifying your position, but it didn't show that you were calm. You know what I mean? Like the
Okay.
feeling isn't matching the action there. And so being okay with that and feeling calm may be what you want to have when you talk to your mom that way. But right now, when you're with the justifying and the going back and forth with you and your mom and the discussion, what is that creating in your relationship with your mom?
In the sense of she's frustrated with it.
What about you?
With me, I'm at peace
Yeah.
with it. And I know, that that's just my mom's personality. And of course, as your mom, it's the same thing for me with my, kids. You always want the best for them, and so you're always going to encourage them to do, things that you think are good for themselves. So I just kind of take it at that with her.
Okay. So what I'm seeing is she's frustrated, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like you, even though you say you're okay with the way things are going, it doesn't sound like it's benefiting your relationship, this discussion that you guys keep having over and over. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a missing piece or something, because if you did feel calm when she tried to get in it with you, your actions would probably be a little bit different. So that's why I'm curious if, even though you may feel calm about, where you're at in your life, I'm curious if there's something that in that relationship with your mom that is bringing up maybe a different feeling underlying that than
Well,
the subject
maybe
itself. You know what I mean?
maybe because when and this is more than I normally share with people, but when all of my stuff happened when I separated, it was with my family. So I think my family feels somewhat responsible because a friend went to my family and they did like a whole intervention of like, you need to come here, it's an emergency. And it was my mom and my sister that said, you need to sit down. So I think they feel somewhat responsible. And yeah. And so I don't know, maybe, and I don't know, but it's just, that's the only thing that I get from a lot of it. It's from my sister and my mom both, that they feel responsible, that they were maybe in the part of us separating because I just wasn't that type of person to walk away.
Okay. So there is a little, and that's what I was curious about, because a lot of times in family systems, even though a situation, like, for example, if my mom says you're not getting any younger, and she has a history of kind of making, little statements like that, whether it's that or something else, there's usually some kind of, because it happens and it's a pattern, then we have this reaction to, our family member or our spouse or whoever. It just seems like maybe that there was something underneath that situation. And so we can talk about this another time too, but it seems like the result that you're creating, if you want to create that true thought of, I'm okay with that and I'm calm, then the reaction that you would have would probably be a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more empowered rather than reactionary. And it sounded like in your conversation, it was a little reactionary. So it's just something to be aware of. Like, what are some ways that you can think about empowering yourself in these conversations where you can still hold your own space and then allow your mom to say whatever she wants, because she has every right to her feelings, but you don't have to hold space for, her opinion in your life, I guess.
They don't react, like think of ways to just listen and kind of not react to her response is what you're saying, or?
Well, yeah, like if you want that calm feeling, and I was your mom and I said, you're not getting any younger, but you want to hold that feeling of calm within you, how would you respond to me so that you could remain calm in that situation? So I say, Mom, you're not getting any younger, and you want to hold that calm feeling inside of you. How are you going to react to me, or what are you going to say?
Okay, well, what does that mean then?
Are you asking me, like, what does that mean? And I'm your mom? Are you asking that?
Okay, so I'm not getting any younger. What does that really mean?
Okay. Do you feel empowered by approaching it that way?
I don't know.
It sounds like a manipulation. It just sounds like a manipulation to me. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It sounds like your mom's just like, hey, how can I nudge you in a way to get you to start dating or to meet a guy, and you're not getting any younger.
Every day.
Yeah.
It's a manipulation, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, people are very manipulative sometimes. So
well, and there's a whole, like, we call it a script, or I call it a script, where we have this script that we want people to follow in the play of our lives, but they don't have the script. And so we look at our script and we expect them to think or do or act a certain way, but they have a script for us, and they think we're supposed to act or do or be a certain way. And so when we hold these scripts or these manuals for each other, that's when our relationships can start to fracture a little bit, because we have expectations. Even though your mom may say you're not getting any younger till the end of forever, you still have this. I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying, like, you particularly, but just like sometimes we think, like, why do they keep saying that? Why do they keep saying that? Or I don't do that. Or it's because they have a script for you, and you need to decide if you want to hold on to your script for them. And so it's just that, it's that kind of that, I don't want to call it a power play, but we have expectations about the way we feel people should behave around us. And when we hold on to that script and we hold people to that script, we're always going to be disappointed every time. And when your mom, it sounds like she's got a script for you, and she keeps holding on to that script, and you just keep disappointing her because you're living your life. So it's about understanding that for, as long as there are families and as long as we're in relationships, I mean, we're not perfect, but having that awareness so that you can go into that situation and be like, Mom, I love you. I love my life. However you want to show up in that moment so that you can show and feel that calmness. I mean, you have that power. And so when you show up in that calm way, when that result that you're going to create is, you are going to be okay with that. You are reinforcing that belief that my life is awesome the way it is, and you can say whatever you want, but I'm going to hold on to that. So just some things to think about. I know we don't have a ton of time, but
those are all really good points.
Yeah, that awareness, I think, will be really key in that relationship if you're aware.
I like that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Melissa. So I think this is the point.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I was gonna say, I think this is the point in our show where we kind of wrap things up and kind of move on to our after show. But we wanted to thank you, Melissa, for coming on, and lots of excellent words of wisdom. That was amazing.
Yeah, so it's awesome to have you on here. Thank you for coming out and taking some time to join us.
Of course.
I hope you had a good time.
I love a good party. Who's going to say no?
After party, it's like off the record, right? So no taping, so it can get kind of fun.
Right. So just before we go, one last bit. Do you want to give a plug for your business or a website if anybody's interested in reaching out to you after watching this and saying, hey,
Yeah.
I'd really like a little coaching from Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I have a Facebook page and it's called Everyday Fearless Coaching. And yeah, just find me there. I post a video every Friday. I call it Fearless Friday, with a challenge throughout the weekend and the week to, face a fear that maybe you have. And it's usually things that are kind of hard to do emotionally. So yeah, just come check it out. I'd be happy to coach anybody. I do a free 30-minute consultation for a first session. So I just love talking to people and sharing what I know. And I would love to have you as a client, but if you don't, then hopefully you get some awareness out of our session together. And yeah, it's great. But yeah, Everyday Fearless Coaching, you can find me there.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. And I really appreciate all your insights. Wonderful stuff tonight. And one last thing for everybody in the audience, going to give out another plug here. If you haven't already, please give us a like on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube page, like the videos, just kind of help us out and help us grow the podcast. So having said that, we'll go ahead and stop the recording.